that we have finally, I can't even count the months and weeks anymore, that we have finally embarked on the final game of the season?
Yeah, I mean, even though the season technically is probably no more than about 10 days longer, it really does seem inconceivable because so much has happened. It was a new experiment. It feels every bit the length of the season. And in some ways, Matt, it really started. I remember talking to you in Dallas for SEC Media Days. I mean,
Yeah.
that's somewhat of the kickoff, and it just never stops.
Yeah, and when you're right, because my iPhone memories will trigger me last week to national championship game pictures being there. And it's like, oh God, that was January 10th a year ago. And here we are, January 20th, an extra week. The teams that made the playoffs, some that go all the way, are playing 3, 4 extra games. But here we are. If I told you at SEC Media Days that you and I would be talking about the national championship and the last two teams standing would be Ohio State, Notre Dame, you would have said, what?
An expletive. I would have easily believed Ohio State. I would have never believed Notre Dame because it just seemed like Georgia was the team, maybe Texas. Maybe there were a couple other ones that you would have figured into the conversation. Not Florida State, by the way. But I remember telling you on I think it was First Take that I didn't think they'd make I didn't think they'd finish in the top 25, and I got scoffed out of the FSU Twitter. But the point is, Notre Dame is been one of those rare, surprising teams. Usually, you don't see that in a
Mm-hmm.
national championship game. They have been unbelievably predictable lately.
So I was just doing a radio interview prior to this, and the thing that I used with Notre Dame that I believe to be the most impressive part about this with Marcus Freeman and that school is, Paul, it's not set up for Notre Dame to win national championships. Notre Dame hasn't set itself up to win national championships because of the standards with which Notre Dame carries itself on an academic level relative to an athletic level. We know that's why Brian Kelly left, because he would get close. He would bring these teams out into a playoff or national championship game and get smoked. And everyone would see, like, hey, look, see how good Notre Dame is to win their schedule. They're not good enough to compete with the best in the country. Somehow Marcus Freeman's figured that out, that now Notre Dame, with a $20 million paycheck they're going to get all to themselves, is now structured and set up to maybe be one of these programs, Paul, we talk year in and year out, is a legitimate threat to win a national championship.
Yeah, and yeah, I think when Brian Kelly made those statements, most people agreed with him. He was going to a place that had won countless national championships, that had just seen Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Jefferson lead one of the more improbable runs in 2019. So I can't say I blamed him. I actually got a little bit mystified when he tried to walk it back this week, saying, "Oh, he's cheering for Notre Dame, and it's no big deal." Everyone knows it's a big deal because I spent the week with Notre Dame fans in New Orleans, and that's all I heard about was Brian Kelly. But ultimately, it is one of the great stories we have seen. College football doesn't often provide stories like this. It's too often about the $20 million payroll, or
Right.
Nick Saban, winning another title at Alabama or something like that. So it is fantastic. I don't think it's a seminal moment in sports. I think some people are trying to make it out to be that. Notre Dame has always been a brand name, and and a lot of people, including myself, have wondered maybe they do need to be in a conference. Now they'll live another 50 years on. We don't need to be in a conference anymore.
Right. Because I had mentioned, for those of you wondering where that $20 million number came from that Notre Dame gets, well, that's the money you get for being in the national championship. Problem is, Ohio State's got to share theirs with the big 17, 18, big 20, whatever they are now. And Notre Dame, guess who they have to share it with? No one. And so that makes them a viable threat year in and year out, with Marcus Freeman, who has seemingly cracked the code of how to get Notre Dame back. Paul, look, I grew up, Arizona State was obviously where I was in Tempe. We had season tickets, but I grew up a Notre Dame fan because they were on national TV, and ASU always played at night because of the heat in the desert. So I knew as a kid at 11 a.m., 10 a.m. every day, I'd get to wake up and hear this fight song and these golden helmets. They've always been that national draw. And it wasn't until cable TV and rights deals expanded that the South became dominant, because Notre Dame had figured it out that national TV was for them and them only. And that's where kids wanted to go play.
Yeah, Matt, in the 60s when you got one college football game a week on TV, Notre Dame had its own slot on Sunday morning where they replayed the game. They cut it down to 20, 30 minutes, but everyone in the country got that, and you didn't see anything else. And then obviously in the 70s, not much really changed until the Supreme Court ruling in the 80s that let you have TV on from morning till night. So uh, there's a lot of things that go into Notre Dame. I mean, I've always cringed about some of the dislike of Notre Dame where I grew up in the South, and it had nothing to do with football. It had everything to do with religion.
Yeah.
Fortunately, this is the antithesis of that. This was a very likable Notre Dame team, and I find almost everyone I know is cheering for Notre Dame because
Mhm.
Ohio State is now like the bad guys on the street because they're part of the Big Ten, and everyone thinks they're the only program that paid for a roster, but that's okay with me.
Yeah, I mean, look, we could go down payrolls legally and illegally for the past 30 years at programs across the country. It's been done. Ohio State just now in this era was very public about it. I'm going to use this next question as a jumping off point for where I want to get with Marcus Freeman because right now there is a strong distaste by coaches across the country with the current calendar in college football and the current structure of college football, which we believe ultimately could chase some of these talented college football coaches to the NFL. And Marcus Freeman's name came up with the Chicago Bears, and that he might be a coach that NFL franchises covet. Now, on the flip side of that, there was a discussion this week about changing the transfer portal window to the beginning part of January, the middle part of January, to see if we can kind of regulate this a little bit. First part of the question, Paul, what do you think the likelihood is that, because we all agree the transfer portal window is absurd with how it's done. What did you make of that decision? There's a coaches conference in Charlotte right now, which I'm sure you've crashed multiple times.
Yeah, well, I have had a chance to sit with some of the coaches. A few came by our studio. We were doing that Tuesday, Matt, while you were hanging out with Tiger Woods, and so the point being, fewer people were watching me, I might add. But ultimately, they do like that window in January. The December window is too cluttered. I mean, not only is the season still going on, but the playoffs are about to begin, but high school recruiting is going on. And while high school recruiting is not what it used to be, it's still pretty important. You have to do it. You have to go. And there's just too
Right.
many moving parts. And you had the situation like you did with Penn State, where the backup quarterback said, "You know what? I'm out of here." That has to change.
Yeah, in big picture, I I still believe like I want Marcus Freeman in college football. I want Sark in college football. I want Deion Sanders in college football. I still want the guys that are really good at their job at this level to stay at this level, but I don't begrudge them for thinking about, well, college isn't the new pros anyway. Why don't I just jump? And I think college and people that run the sport, which I don't know who the adults in the room is, they need to understand and protect these brands that they have with these coaches because once one or two of them figure out it's better in the NFL, Paul, there's no going back.
No, and listen, you've heard this a million times. College football is the second biggest sport in the country. It is, but the difference between college football and the NFL is just gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
And you just watch your own network. I mean, we're taping this on Thursday of the national championship weekend. And Matt, it's hard to find a college football conversation on ESPN right now because we have the four biggest games of the year in the NFL coming up
Right.
Saturday and Sunday. And we go through this every year. It doesn't matter whether it was on wild card weekend, the final weekend, it's always the same. And then suddenly Monday, it all changes once we get through with the 45 or 50 minutes of recap of whatever the Eagles did or the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the wrong way to go about it. I know that there's probably not much we can do, but college football has to find a niche, or it has to hope to find one because just sticking games on random Thursday and Friday nights like we saw last week doesn't work very well. And I'm not even sure the Monday night works very well because by the time you get to Monday, we have seen a lot of pro football, and there is a fatigue level.
See, and you bring up the NFL, and I think that's important because the NFL is starting to wade into waters that usually were just for college football. And I bring up, the Thursday situation
Right.
with the NFL. the Christmas Day situation with, I mean, there's a lot of, hey, we're going to come get into your real estate. There was an early season holiday that happened. I don't remember. There's so many calendar holidays where the NFL got into that. And
Or you
so
had
I'm with
Black
you.
Friday after Thanksgiving.
Right. And so I think there needs to be a discussion with all governing parties to say, hey, how do we just make football great in America for everyone instead of just trying to land grab the real estate and dog eat dog when in reality, it doesn't need to be that way. And I would say this about the NFL, the numbers would prove a little bit, but maybe would suggest otherwise. Talk to the players. The NFL players don't like playing on Thursdays. They just don't. Their weeks are so quick, and very rarely does it coincide with a bye week. So, I mean, here's a novel concept. Talk to your employees.
I don't know how we can go back. And Matt, you're right. 10, 15 years ago, Thursday night was sacrosanct in college football. You understand it better than I do now because you do games on Thursday night, what the impact of the NFL has had. But it's always been a problem at the end of the year. There's not a great solution. The only way the college football can get around it a little bit is do something they don't want to do, and that's start the season earlier. And the week zero, I think, has to be week one because the
Yeah.
beginning of the college football season is so important.
Hmm.
If you went to week zero, then you would have at least 2 weeks without competition,
Right.
and you might be able to find a better way to end the season. And again, I understand that those January 1st games, nobody wants to let go of them. They're important, but on one level, that's really where the season ought to end. But we know it's not going to, though.
Yeah. It used to, right? New
Yeah,
Year's Day, most of America would wake up hungover from New Year's Eve, and you would watch the college football games. You would celebrate those games, and then that would be it. And there's still it. Look, you and I and everyone who covers the sport, what do we always say going into a college football playoff game or something that leading into the postseason? We're like, oh, it's been a month since they played. Well, that means there's a month window where we're talking about teams not playing. I remember going into the Arizona State Texas playoff game. It's like, well, ASU hadn't played in over 3 weeks. Well, why not? Like, let's start finding a way to make the calendar benefit
now we're
everyone.
wasting a week. I know I'm going to upset somebody, but the week of the Army Navy game needs to be the playoffs. And that is a wasted Saturday where what do we have? We have the Army Navy game and the Heisman. Okay. We can't figure that out some other time.
And I forget who said it recently. Was it Joe Clatt? It was someone that said Army Navy should kick off the season. What a great way to kick off
I
the
agree.
season, then use that next Saturday after championship Saturday. So there's ways to fix the calendar to get to a point. I just worry with where college football is and a kind of an inflection point with NIL, portal, and money and coaches and this, that, and the other. We have to reel it back in because it's still the greatest sport on the planet. The ratings will prove that, but there's ways to make it even better as we move forward to the end of this season. Ohio State, we talked about the Notre Dame side of this. I would contend that this game is much bigger for Ryan Day than it is Marcus Freeman. What would you say?
It is. I think a lot of people are asking, well, what's going to happen if he loses the game? Well, first of all, I don't think that's going to happen. But if it did, there would be a lot of criticism, especially if it ended badly. A Sark-like call by Ryan Day that gives Notre Dame the win. But there's no way Ryan Day is going back to where he was on the final Saturday of November. That's just not happening. He has done a lot. He's won three playoff games, and some of them have been, two of them have been just downright all three have quite frankly been over impressive teams. This is not the Penn State path or someone else's path. I mean, these are Tennessee, Oregon, and obviously Texas says a lot, especially those two over the SEC. So I don't think he's going back, but I mean, it would seem like a lost season of sorts if you get this far with this roster, overcome what you have done already, and then let it slip away against what is perceived to be an inferior program.
Yeah, and when you look at the Buckeyes in this 3 week run that they've been on, the more that they separate themselves from the Michigan loss, the more that it is 100% clear. And I get it. If Michigan fans don't see this, I don't blame them. They beat Ohio State again, which they should be bragging about until they don't get beat by them. But to me, it's clear that that was such an outlier and aberration of who Ohio State really is that you look at the Buckeyes now, the 3 weeks that we've seen out of them, Paul, that's who they are. Anyone who hasn't changed their focus to look at Ohio State and be like, oh, okay, that's the Buckeyes. Michigan team wasn't a Buckeyes.
Yeah, what happened is, I mean, we walked out of the Cotton Bowl Friday night going, that was a terrible performance by Ohio State. They just beat Texas um, in Texas, and we were looking at them because we were grading them on the curve. The fact that they only won by 14 points, including the scoop and score, it just seemed like they played a C game, a B or C game. And that's the scary part. If they play if they play a crisp game Monday night, it won't be close, I don't think. And that's, yeah, you know, how Notre Dame fans can take that however they want. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's just the reality.
Yeah, and finally, as we wrap up our preview here on the Matt Berry Show, presented by Allstate, as we check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate, when you look at where this thing will end on Monday night, is it going to be this postseason coronation of the Buckeyes, or is the Rudy Rudiger story behind Notre Dame and their run through the playoff going to continue?
I cannot imagine Notre Dame winning the game. Something tells me I'll probably hear that statement again Tuesday if I'm wrong. I just can't. And I know it's cliche to say, Matt, you know, Notre Dame's really good, and I see it coming down to a late. I don't see it. To me, this looks like the first couple of games by Ohio State. I think the Texas game was the outlier. Texas was really good.
Yeah.
They're sneaky good. I think Notre Dame is solid. But they're missing a couple of key components. I think Jeremiah Love being banged up is a problem. Losing linemen is a problem. I mean, their special teams are fantastic, but Ohio State is fantastic across the board. It's just a matter of what level do they play to, and I think if they play to a high level, this game is not close.
Yeah, the irony of all of this is that at the end of the day, at the end of the night, whenever we're done wrapping up college football final there on site, the irony of all of this is that Ohio State could have Michigan to thank for winning the national championship because of what that did to kind of wake them up in their locker room. And I lied. One last question. There's always one more. I mean, Paul, we're very likely living in a world where for 2 consecutive years, the Big Ten Northern football is hoisting a national championship. Look, Notre Dame's North, so it holds no matter what. But if the Big Ten, I mean, they're probably laughing that they are now back-to-back national champions if this happens.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been asked a few times this week, what's it like in SEC land? Gloomy. It's dark. It's cold down here. I mean, it really is, by the way. I mean, it's like the polar vortex has just grabbed hold of the SEC, and there's no getting out of it either. I mean, I hear all the excuses from my brethren in the SEC, but there are none. I mean, you had two shots at Ohio State, one shot at Notre Dame. It wasn't like the league wasn't given a fair chance, and it failed. And I think that what does it mean? I mean, I think you can analyze it to death, but it means that the SEC has lost its stranglehold on college football. There's no getting around that. And the more that we try in the SEC to subterfuge and obfuscate and say, oh, that's not the reality. It is. And it's the reality for a lot of reasons. I know the last time we talked, I mentioned that some of the players from the SEC that went to Ohio State. That's not the only reason they're good. They were good before Judkins got there, and Caleb Downs and McLaughlin and a couple of other players. But Ohio State has always been good. It's just a matter of to what degree. And I think yeah, is it a seismic shift? Is it a seminal moment? I mean, it will be, if Ohio State wins the game, it will be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
One thing it won't be is an SEC championship.
How much of that is because for so many years, 17, so many years, everyone in the SEC was chasing Nick Saban and the standard that he was setting across college football. Now, they were winning their fair share of national championships, but everyone in the SEC knew that if they wanted to win a national championship or hell, even an SEC championship, they had to do what they could to catch Nick Saban and try to be up to his standard. And he's not
That,
there.
that was it. So from 2009 into 2020, which is not a long time, Nick Saban was in the national championship game 9 times. I mean, you'll meet a coach somewhere and say, I met Frank Beamer a couple of years ago. Frank Beamer, comma, who played for one national champion. I mean, that's what he's known for. Okay,
Right.
well, Nick Saban played for 9 at Alabama, 10 national championships if you include LSU in '03. And by the way, he was also in the playoffs like 2 or 3 more times. I mean, so he owned that period. Now, if you take him away, yeah, LSU was in there with Ed Ogeron, and Auburn made it twice into the championship game, and Georgia made it a couple of times. But it was like if you go back to 2000 in golf,
And Tiger.
everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
if you beat Tiger Woods in the Greater Greensboro Open, which he probably never played in, by the way, that was a big deal. That was the same way with Saban, and so he's gone. Kirby was supposed to take the sport over. He didn't.
Yeah. And now we're looking at an era, and we bring all this up, and it's really wild when you think about you brought up the Tiger Woods era where we probably won't see dominance like that again. The Nick Saban era in college football, the Tom Brady and Bill Belichick era in the NFL, those are all gone. And so, well, if you don't count the North Carolina era that's coming in Chapel Hill, but it's I mean, it really is. It's something to behold. And I year 2 of DeBoer, I bring this up because now the aftershocks of Saban are gone. It's now Kalen DeBoer's program. How will college football sit in this new world order post Nick Saban for the next 10 years? To me, that's one of the more fascinating storylines in this game.
Yeah, and I mean, Kalen DeBoer is a big story, but I think this was really more about Saban than the SEC. The SEC chant started, I think, with Florida when they beat Ohio State in 2006 or whatever it was, and that's really when it began. Urban Meyer won 2 national championships for the SEC before Nick Saban did,
Yeah.
interestingly enough. Les Miles figured in there as well. As crazy as that sounds. So I mean, there were a lot of moving parts, but it was really about Saban, and it's only been a year and 10 days, Matt, since Nick Saban retired. But it does feel like a lifetime.
And watch me bring this all the way back to Ohio State as we just, Paul and I go on college football tangent talks, and these are my favorite ones. But this all comes back to Ohio State because you bring up Urban Meyer.
Mhm.
I believe that the Big Ten started to change its look and compete for national championships because when Urban took that year off, went up to Ohio State, Paul, what did he do? He ran through the Big Ten because he was the only one that recruited the Big Ten like an SEC school. And he maintained all of his relationships down in Florida. He maintained all of his relationships in Texas recruiting. He was bringing Southern kids to Ohio State, and that's when you saw the best of them. Urban could be credited at Ohio State for changing kind of the footprint because he stayed, you know what? I'm going to recruit the guys that I did down at Florida, only I'm bringing them up to the Big Ten where they're going to be bigger, faster, and stronger than anybody I play.
And he did all of that, and he did another thing. He forced Michigan to wake up. And as Urban was getting ready to win the national championship exactly 10 years ago, what did Michigan do? They finally decided that Jim Harbaugh was cool enough to come back, which they originally did not think he was. And it took him a long time, but he helped solidify the Big Ten's position. And that's a really good point. By the way, I always felt like Urban Meyer, every time I say this, people in Ohio get mad, but he underperformed. He only won one championship there. He probably
Yeah.
should have won 3 or 4. The best team, I think one of the best teams I've ever seen in college football was the 2015 Ohio State
Yep.
team with Ezekiel Elliott that lost to Michigan State on the next to the last week.
King Aries right there. Fuck him up. Fuck him up. All right, he got you. Get him, Tristan. Fuck him up. Tell him to fuck him up.
10 seconds.
Gonna be a hit marker. It's silenced. What are you doing?
Nice work.
What are you doing? He could have had that. He could have had that. He literally sat there.
Oh yeah, dude. I don't know why.
He could have killed you so easy. He made that easy for us.
Them trash cans, dude.
That was probably the 1 and 8, dude.
Probably was.
Hey, do you think it's a good thing Madeline and I broke up?
Yeah. 100%.
For some
Why?
reason I can't stop like thinking about it. Like she was like a good person, but like I don't think us as a relationship was good.
She cheated on you, dude.
I know. But I mean like I kind of see like why, cuz like I was kind of shitty to her in like the aspect where I was like she was trying to have sex and I was kind of like just like you can. Yeah, she cheated on me twice. She cheated on me twice. How can I say that?
Are you like unless you're like beating her? No, there's no like no
Yeah, I
valid
was, like,
excuse.
I was a good person. I mean, just because we didn't have sex.
They're making us fight for it. Keep at 'em.
Oh. Oh!
Oh, hit!
Hostiles in the area.
Yeah.
I've got you!
See him?
Secure all cash to find. Enemy attack chopper in the AO. Bring it down and...
Hey, sorry guys.
Hit the door.
Keep fighting, we got this. We're almost done. One more to go. Now that was a fight. Solid work.
Leave?
And they'll try again, 2nd and 10. They'll fake the handoff. Now Smith. And he's taken down. This will be a Brown sack.
Okay, you know my best is about to come out here. A lot of people would think that the offense is just moving in the wrong direction. I'd say they're moving in the right direction because the defense is pushing them back.
Former defensive guy. Now, as a quarterback, 3rd and long, you really got to rally the troops here, don't you?
Yeah, you do in a big way. And what else do you have to look out for? More pressure coming at you because it seems to be working pretty well.
3rd and long, it's Smith escaping the pressure right. Slings this deep. This is caught inside the 15. And he takes it in. Touchdown, Washington.